Hi there, welcome to another painting tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint this pine cone. So let's get started. I'm going to take my fine mist spray bottle and add a mist. That's just going to help the paint flow a little bit better. And then let's start with a fairly large brush, a size 11 flat. And I want to put in our base color. And for that, I'm going to use, I have a Vandyke Brown paint. So I'm just going to apply that paint. For these thinner lines here, I'm using the edge of the brush. And just go ahead and follow the link below to get this sketch and then paint along with me. Okay, so we'll just paint all of this brown. And I'm making tutorials every Monday and Wednesday. So I'd love for you to subscribe and join the channel. I'm trying to come up with some winter holiday type of motifs and projects. I like to stay kind of relevant with the holidays. It's just fun to choose those subjects to paint. Okay, so we just have a nice layer of brown. That's our local color. And go ahead and turn your paper so that these brush strokes are a little bit easier for you. I am not turning it just for the sake of the video, but when you paint along at home, just go ahead and do what is most comfortable. And turning the paper does help. When you get the best angle, you can just get cleaner, more precise strokes. And then let's take this brown and paint in the pine cones at the bottom. And go to the edge of the brush to give a nice fine refinement for those smaller little spikes along the edges. Doesn't have to be too precise. So the one on the right side is facing down, and then the one on the left side is facing up. So that composition is just giving us a little variety and interest. Okay. And now, while this is kind of wet, I'm going to add a darker value, kind of like a shadow. And I want to I have some Payne's gray. You can use Payne's gray or black and maybe mix it up with a little bit of Vandyke Brown or whatever brown you're using, just a dark brown. You can use like a burnt umber. And then let's put this in kind of in the center of the pine cone. So basically wherever the shadow is, you can add this color. If you needed more water, you could add another spray. Just adding some shadow, building up form. Okay, it's mostly in the center of the pine cone. So then let's add shadow to this one. And then to this one, it's kind of at the base of the pine cone is more shadow. And it just kind of makes a smaller pine cone shape within the shape, if that makes sense. Okay. And then you could take some dark brown and use the edge of that brush and then just put in some branches. Carefully put in branches using that edge of the brush. Okay. And if you wanted to do some of the little spike details, you could add those in. Just very carefully using that edge. Just building form. Getting some definition. Okay, that's giving us a nice underpainting. Okay, and now let's try to add a lighter value. So I have maybe some tan, some beige paint on my palette. That's just a craft paint that you can get at the craft store. And let's try to put some kind of lighter values along the edges here. It's just giving us some variety. Okay, so then you have your underpainting and you want to let this dry completely before moving on to the next step. Next, we're going to switch to a large filbert brush. I have a size 11 here. And we're going to put some white paint on here, some titanium white. And we're using that because it's a very opaque paint. And we're using the filbert because it gives us the shape of the pine cone pieces. So I'm getting the edge of the brush in to the paint. And then I want to make kind of a C shape along the bottom. So it's just kind of like a half moon shape. You can kind of press down and lift up. We'll do that along the bottom. And then as I go up, I'm going to make a little bit larger sections. Just form them a little bit more. And I want quite a bit of paint so that it's really opaque and it's really getting good coverage over that darker layer. And then try to be a little bit random with this as well. You don't want the same number of pieces in each row, and you don't want each row to be perfectly even. It's just going to give us a more natural appearance. And I always find it really tricky to not make things kind of ordered and uniform. That's just the way the human brain works. It wants to make everything kind of make sense and put everything into order. So try to fight that natural urge and be a little more spontaneous. Okay, and then off to the side, you can kind of make one that kind of hangs over the edge a little bit. You can make some smaller. And then turn your page if you need to for some of these side pieces. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just try your best. Okay, so I think that looks good. I could add a little bit more paint to some of these if I wanted to. Okay. All right, so rinse off your brush, and then before we do that next step, we need to let that dry completely. And while it's drying, let's move over to the greenery. And for that, I'm going to use a 1 rigger brush or liner brush. And I want to use some color theory here. I want to have some brighter greens and then some cooler greens. So let's work with the cooler greens first. So I have, pull this up. This is a minty green shade that I have. And for this brush, you really want to kind of twirl it. And then let's see, kind of map out where we want the cooler bristles or needles. Okay, you might need to add some water. This paint is a couple days old, so it's not as smooth. And you can see this brush, it just really makes it easy to make those nice lines. I think this is the best brush for making thin lines. It's called a rigger brush or a liner brush or a script brush. It's got a lot of names, but I think it was used for putting the lines on sailboats for people that paint boats. Okay, so just have fun with this part. It can be pretty loose. You're just making little lines for the pine needles. And then roll the brush. We'll move over to this one. Again, try to make some variety. Don't make everything too perfect or too symmetrical. Okay, and then you could add a darker cool green. I have this Hooker's green, which I'm going to mix, kind of let it mix a little bit with the minty green, and then kind of add a layer of that. So it's just nice to use more than one color. It's just going to give your piece a little more variety. It's going to make it more interesting and allow it to be more dynamic. So I'll just pop a little bit of that in. Okay, and now I want to work with the warmer colors. So if you think of your color theory, your warmer colors are going to stand forward and your cooler colors are going to recede to the background. So I'm going to wake up this dark forest green color that I have, roll my brush in it, and apply that in the same manner. So I'm using dark and light to give a little bit of contrast as well. Whoops. And again, try to make these look random. Constantly fighting that urge to make everything even and symmetrical, which is just not how things are in nature. So just tell yourself variety, variety, variety. Okay, and then I'm gonna rinse off that brush and then get a lighter shade of green. That's a nice bright green, a warmer green. This is a beautiful moss color. And I got this one at the craft store pre-mixed. I like to use pre-mixed greens because I find it difficult to mix them. So I prefer to just go to the craft store, buy some shades of green that I really love, and work with those. Because I could mix them, but I would spend a lot of time trying to mix them. This just saves a lot of time. It's like a convenience color. Okay, so try to be random, short and long, thick and thin, just all the varieties you can think of. Okay. All right, so, oops, we forgot to do the white marks on the bottom. little pine cones. So I'll take a size 6 filbert, which is smaller, and then we'll take some titanium white. And we're going to do that same approach that we did to the larger one. So we'll just start at the base and try to do some C-shape curves using pretty thick amounts of paint. And then when we get to the tip, we're kind of making almost like a rose shape or a flower shape in the center. And then we'll do that to the one on the bottom. So I would probably turn my paper upside down to do this part. That would make it a little easier. Okay, so then you want to let that dry completely. So for the next step, we're going to do some glazing with a light brown color and some clear gloss medium. And we can use our larger brush. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this gloss medium. It's just Liquitex gloss medium. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that to this brown color that I have on my palette. And it's a pretty transparent brown to begin with. If you don't have a gloss medium, just go ahead and use some water and just thin it down. And we're going to use this for some glazing. Okay, so we're just going to glaze over these white areas. And that should really make them pop and stand out. It's also going to blend in the white. So instead of glazing over the whole thing, I'm just kind of putting it on top of the white areas because I want my darker values that we painted underneath to still show through. Okay. Okay, and then the ones at the bottom, I'm probably just going to go over that completely because those aren't our centerpieces. They're not our focal point. So we don't need them to look really detailed. Okay, so that's probably all I would do with that one. Okay, so now let's just add a little bit of contrast. So you could take, I have some Burt Sienna here, and I'm going to mix it up with a little bit of our Vandyke Brown. Basically, I want a shade. I want to mix up a shade to put on some of these little pieces. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit more of a shadow, making the parts that are towards the inside of the pine cone just a little bit darker. That's just giving us a little bit more realism, a little bit more dimension. I would let that dry. And I wouldn't do it to the bottom just because, like I said, you don't want it to be as detailed. Okay, and then for the final part, I would just do a little bit of a highlight. So you could take some titanium white, mix it with a beige color, and then you could put a few highlights just in a few areas. If you need a little more contrast, just grab some straight white and it can blend wet on wet. Okay, so those are just our little pops of highlight. Okay, so I'm going to call mine complete. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials. Paint along with me every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for watching. Bye.